Hello everyone, my name is Jovin and today I am bringing you an in-depth guide about the dealer's AI in Buckshot Roulette. If you've ever wondered about what exactly the dealer is thinking about and how to abuse his AI, this is the right guide for you. I will go over every little detail there is to know about him, so that you can fully exploit his AI and maybe even get a new high score. This is as of version 1.2.2. I'm recording this in May 2024. It may be outdated if you're watching later. Okay, let's get started. In this video I will fully explain how the dealer chooses who to shoot, when the dealer knows the shell or when he doesn't. I will explain how the dealer chooses the order of items to use, and when he wants to use any specific item. I will also explain a few of the item interactions that aren't immediately obvious to the player who's playing. And I will finally give a bit of advice on how to abuse the information that you've gained in this video. So, when the dealer has the shotgun, how does he decide who to shoot? If the dealer knows the shell, he will always shoot the correct player, quite obviously. If it's alive, shoot the player. If it's a blank, shoot himself. Unless he's got an inverter or something. Anyway, if he doesn't know the shell, in normal mode, which is when you're not taking the pills, he will just do a coin flip. It's a 50-50. In double or nothing, however, which is like, the main mode you should play, like who plays normal mode in 2024, am I right? He will still do a coin flip if the amount of lives are exactly the same as the amount of blanks. But if there are more blanks than lives, he will shoot himself. And if there are more lives than blanks, then he will shoot the player. So he's a bit more predictable in that way. Now, as you may know, shooting yourself isn't always the best option, so it's definitely good to make the dealer shoot himself as much as possible, if you can. I will cover an exception to this rule later, which is just a bug involving beer. You may have heard of it or not, but yeah, we'll get to it later. Okay, but when does the dealer know the shell or not? Obviously when he's using a magnifying glass, or when he's used a burner phone he could possibly know the shell later. He will also know the shell if there's one shell left. But also in double or nothing, if the dealer knows every position of one type of shell, then he can figure out the rest of the shells. Kind of like, a human. So for example, if there's 3 shells left, 1 live, 2 blank, he gets a burner phone and it goes 3rd shell live, then he will figure out that the first 2 shells are blank. But only in double or nothing mode. So let's get to the nitty-gritty stuff. If we can look at this 8 awesome inverters that the dealer has, which one will he exactly use first? Well, it's all about spawn order, excluding adrenaline. And now what the hell is the spawn order? Well, it's when the item spawned first, when he got the possession of the item. That's like he's putting that in a list, and it goes from the top of the list. The item that he got first, he will try to use first. So if he pulled the bottom left inverter first out of any other inverter, he will try using that first. So he's going to go through all of his items and check each individual item according to the spawn order. He goes first to that bottom left inverter, if that's what spawned first, and then he will check, does he want to use it or not? And if he doesn't, he will go on to the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, until he finally wants to use an item. Let's say he has a secret, for example, that he wants to use because he's not at full health. Then he will repeat, going through every item again. And it goes, repeats and repeats and repeats until he finds no item left that he wants to use. So when every item is checked, basically. And at that point, that's when he will decide who to shoot. And after he's decided who to shoot, he's going to check his hand saws again. It's a specific thing about hand saws. And then finally, he will actually shoot himself or the player. Alright, so now we know how the dealer operates. Now you may be asking exactly, how should I know the spawn order? And the thing is, you kinda don't. You can know it a little bit, but not fully. For the dealer, you can kinda see it as item groups, where there's groups of items that you don't know the spawn order of. But you know that this group spawned before the other group. And these groups are of course groups between loadouts, or in the case of a carryover round, also between rounds. So if you put like an inverter in the first loadout, and then you empty every shell and get new items, and then you get an adrenaline. You know that the inverter spawned before the adrenaline. So yeah, that's kinda the best information you can go off. You don't really have more information, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean it's totally useless. If you want to play optimally, it's pretty crucial to keep the spawn order in mind. Luckily, we do know the spawn order of the player. The player's items, I mean. It's just the same order as you picked from the item box. So because of this, there are no item groups. You just know the exact order of the items you picked up, if you remember them, of course. Now, why would you ever want to track the player's items? We'll get to it later, but you can probably figure out by one specific item. Now, the last thing I want to bring up before we get to each individual item, you may, if you're very observant in the game, you may have noticed that sometimes the dealer's beer can specifically has shadows that the players can see when they pick up the items, because normally you can't really see the dealer as he picked up the items, otherwise you wouldn't really have these item groups. But sometimes the shadow spawns as you pick up a specific item. Like in this example, we've got the player is picking up an expired medicine, and then as the player puts the medicine down, you can see here there's a little shadow right here for beer can. Now, does that shadow indicate that the dealer picked up the item exactly when the player picked up the medicine? Unfortunately, no. Shadows do not indicate an item spawn order. They're completely independent of one another. Why? Don't ask me, I don't know. But don't depend on the shadows, because they lie. Okay, let's get into all the specific items, when the dealer wants to use them, and why. So when does he want to use the magnifying glass? If the dealer doesn't know the current shell, he will use it. Yeah, that's it. Nothing more to explain here. What about cigarettes? He will use cigarettes if the dealer's charge is less than the maximum charge. Also quite self-explanatory, so let's get over to the expired medicine. If the dealer's charge is less than the maximum charge, just like the cigarettes, he will have a chance of, he might use it, but there's also more stuff to check. That's right, the dealer needs to get rid of all of his cigarettes in order to use the expired medicine. So that's something very useful to know. He also won't use it if his charge is 1. He needs to have more than 1 charge. And also, just so you know, the dealer does gain charge 50% of the time. It's a coin flip just like the player. The dealer isn't cheating here. But yeah, let's get going to the beer. This is going to be a bit more interesting now. So the requirements aren't that special. If the current shell isn't live, that's when he wants to use the beer. Or more exactly, if he doesn't know that the current shell is live. It could be live, but if he doesn't know it, then he doesn't know. He will also only use beer if the shell count is more than 1. Which is pretty smart. But here's the thing, the beer doesn't only rack a shell. It actually does a secret other thing. You may have heard of it, it's called the mag beer bug. So it involves using the magnifying glass before the dealer uses a beer. And let me explain here by telling you exactly what the magnifying glass does in the code. It sets the variable dealer knows shell true, so that the dealer knows the shell. It sets the known shell to either live or blank, and then sets the dealer target to player or self, depending on the shell. Now here's the thing, in normal mode, drinking a beer does not reset these variables. So even when the dealer drinks a beer after using a magnifying glass, the dealer will still always think, in normal mode at least, that it's still a blank the very next shell, even though he already used a beer on that blank. So that's why it's pretty common in normal mode that you see he uses beer on the blank and then he just shoots himself. Right? He's supposed to know when there's only 1 shell left, he's supposed to know what it is. But it doesn't matter in this case, because the dealer knows shell is already set to true, the known shell is already set to blank. So he's going to shoot himself even though it's actually live. Now many people believe that this is patched in Double or Nothing in the Steam release. This is in fact not true. Now it's not as potent, but it's still there. Let me explain exactly how. So when the beer is used in Double or Nothing mode, it does set the following variables. It sets dealer knows shell to false. That's good. It clears the known shell. Good. However, it doesn't clear dealer target. The dealer target will still be self in this case. Because if it was player, he would always just shoot the player. So in this case, when you use a spear, it will still be self. That's kind of sus. So, what is this dealer target variable? What does it do? When does it matter? Well, it determines who the dealer wants to shoot. If the dealer knows shell, the dealer target will be overwritten in that round. However, if he doesn't know the shell, the dealer will skip the logic of deciding who to shoot and always just shoot himself instead. And if you don't remember what that logic is, it was this, right? I talked about it before. But in this case, right, he will always just shoot himself, even when there's more lives than blanks. But the thing is, right, since he does clear the dealer knows shell variable, he will not get the bug as often. If he uses a magnifying glass, or if there's 0 shells left of any specific type, he will know it, and then he will overwrite the dealer target, so it doesn't really matter in those cases. But still, this is something to keep in mind. Alright, that's all I had to talk about that. Let's get going to the handcuffs. He will use the handcuffs if the player isn't already cuffed, and if the shell count is more than 1. If you listen to the previous parts, you will know that Handcuffs have no influence on whether the dealer shoots himself or you, so he could cuff you at 2 shells and then decide to shoot himself for some reason. It's just that's a thing he likes to do. Anyway, let's get going to the handsaws. It's pretty similar to the handcuffs, where he won't use a handsaw if you already use one, obviously. And he will only use it if the current known shell is live. Initially, at least. As I said before, when the dealer has decided who to shoot, he will check handsaw again, and this time he will just use it if he decides to shoot the player. So basically, what all of this means is just he will always use handsaw if he wants to shoot the player. Always. Now the burner phone is pretty interesting. It's pretty thought-provoking. Because he will only use it if the shell count is more than 2. Even though, if the shell count is 2, that's like when the burner phone is actually useful, right? It's like a magnifying glass in that case. It's awesome. But nope, the dealer doesn't want to use it in those situations. He also doesn't really have a restraint for not knowing any shells, so if he does know the whole loadout, but the shell count is more than 2, he will use the burner phone. Unless he uses a beer before it or something like that. Now, a very interesting property about the burner phone is that it actually isn't the same phone as the player's phone. It behaves a little bit differently. See, multiple phones that the dealer uses in succession will always reveal any random shell's info. It could be the same shell, but it also could be a different shell. That's not how it is with the player's phone. If the player uses a phone, let's say he gets the info that the 3rd shell is blank, okay, then he steals the dealer's phone because the player can't have more than one phone. Do you know what the phone is going to say? It's going to say 3rd shell blank. Okay, let's steal his 2nd phone. Let's do another one. See what it says. It's going to say 3rd shell blank. And it will always repeat the same information until you shoot or you use a beer. You basically, when you change the shell count. You have to change the shell count if you want more information out of burner phones. That is not the case with the dealer. So yeah, he's cheating a bit in this case. Oh well, let's get going to the inverter. The dealer will use the inverter if he knows that the current shell is blank, and only then. He won't use it if it's 4 blank or 1 live. He will always only use it when he exactly knows that the current shell is blank. That's it for the inverter. As I said earlier, he will ignore the spawn order for the adrenaline specifically. He will always just use it last. He will always check his adrenalines last after any other item. He will always use his own version of an item before stealing the player's. But how exactly does he know if he wants to use a player's items or not? Well, you see, he treats the player's items exactly like if they were the dealer's. Except of course for the player's adrenaline. He can't use that. So yeah, all of the things I said about the items earlier, they are applied the exact same rules. And because of that too, the spawn order for the player's items matter, because the dealer will check the player's items according to the spawn order, and that's why you should keep track of your spawn order. Not only the dealer's, but also your own. In fact, I would say that keeping track of your own item's spawn order is actually more useful than keeping track of the dealer's. Because you can more precisely control exactly what the dealer steals, and that's super useful. Now that we know exactly what the dealer does, now we can predict the dealer. If you keep track of both the dealers and your own items, you can predict what the dealer will do and then plan different routes and see which one has the higher chance of success and then roll with it. Yeah, you can't always predict exactly, but you can predict more than you could without this information. So let's see some examples of spawn order item tracking and how it can be useful. So in this situation, there's one live and one blank left. And I have indicated the item spawn orders with light blue being the first group. Because remember, they're in groups, but the groups can be just one item. And the second group is in dark green. That's pretty lucky for you, because the dealer will use the beer first. He has a 50% chance of hitting the live with the beer, and then not being able to do anything and just shoot himself. Imagine if the magnifying glass was the first spawned item. He would always use it, and then he will hit you no matter what. So that's just one example of how spawn orders matter. Let's take another example. This time I'm gonna highlight to abuse the adrenaline rules. So again, we have a bit more spawn orders. We are keeping track of the players' items. It goes from light blue to green to yellow to orange to red. Got it? So in this case, the dealer will first, let's say the dealer's turn is now. He will first check the inverter. He doesn't know the shell. Let's presume that. So he will check either the handsaw or the adrenaline. Actually, he won't check the adrenaline first because it doesn't apply from the spawn order rules. So he will check the handsaw first actually, but he doesn't want to use that either because he doesn't know the current shell. So he will use his adrenaline. Let's assume the max charge is 2. So he does have full health, so he doesn't want to use expired pills. He doesn't want to use the player's adrenaline, so we'll skip over those. And what's left is the handcuffs and the burner foam. And unless the shell count is 2 or less, 1 or 2, he will always steal the burner foam in this situation. So you don't have to always panic use your handcuffs, your strongest items. If a burner phone or an expired pills or maybe a cigarette, if you want to, anything you want to give to the dealer, if it's spawned first, you might as well just let him steal it and keep your strong items and so you can use them when they're at their strongest. Let's take a look at a final example. Again, it goes from light blue to green to yellow to orange. Now let's say it's your turn this time. What do you want to do? Now, I don't know the shell count, it doesn't really matter for this situation, but let's say you want to use a magnifying glass. Which one do you decide to use? The correct answer is probably that you want to use the right one, because that spawned first. Because if you use the other one, let's say you hit a live, okay, you shoot it. Maybe you steal his handcuffs, okay fine, you shoot another time. Okay, you don't, because then you would use the magnifying glass and would ruin the example. So let's say you didn't steal the handcuffs, you left the right magnifying glass. The dealer, on his turn, when he uses his adrenaline, he will steal your magnifying glass. Oh no. If you had used your right magnifying glass instead of the left one, then look, the beer spawned before the left magnifying glass, so he will steal that instead. Congratulations, you kept your magnifying glass and you gave him a beer. Good job. So yeah, keep the spawn order in mind. Even when you're using the exact same item, it can make a big difference. Now we're done with the examples, but you may ask, okay, but how do I keep track of all the items and the spawn orders? And it's so much. Well, I've got a tool for you. I have built a web page. You can see the link there. I'll probably link it in the description as well. It looks like this. Might be a bit overwhelming, but I'll explain everything that's going on. On the left side, you just have a basic shell tracker. It keeps track of the shells in the loadout. Basic stuff. Got burner phone support as well. Nice. On the right, there's a button you can click to open this beautiful menu where you can see 8 squares on the dealer side and 8 squares on the player side, and you can click on any of these squares and it will show up a number, and the order that you clicked these squares is the order of the spawn order. So you basically just click the squares in the order that you put your items in the game. And since you don't know exactly the dealer's spawn order, you can just click all of them at once. It won't increment the number for the dealer's side. So you can click as many items as you want, and then you click on this little button here, the next group, and that's when you decide to advance to the next group. So you can actually keep track of the different groups. And then you can just press reset when you want. You can click on a square again whenever the dealer or the player uses an item. Just click on it again and it will disappear. So yeah, this I would recommend using this on a second monitor if you have one. You can use an iPad maybe. It will be a bit cramped on the phone. I'm sure it could work, but I don't know how fun it would be to use this on a small phone screen. Alright, that's all I have to say for this presentation. Now you fully understand too how the dealer works, and now you can go become a billionaire if you want. Go get that billion. Or aim for higher. I don't know. You decide. Thanks for watching.